Welcome back to Movies Recapped. Today I will show you a biographical war film from 2016 titled Hacksaw Ridge. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. Two young brothers, Desmond Doss and Hal, are running playfully through the woods. They live with their mother Bertha and their gruff father, Tom. Tom is still haunted by his service in World War I and now drinks heavily and regularly beats his sons. The boys run back to the family home and begin an energetic play fight in front of the house. In the tussle, Doss picks up a brick and hits Hal over the head, instantly leaving him in a retarded stupor. As their parents frantically try to aid Hal, Doss is overcome with glee. The family is strict 21st Day Adventists, and a large illustration of the 10 Commandments hangs in the house. Doss sees the commandments "Thou shalt not kill" and, convinced that he has murdered his brother, feel nothing but intense grief. Greg goes to whip Doss on the rump with his belt, but Bertha stops him by explaining that it won't teach their son anything. Bertha talks to his guilt-ridden son as he knows he could have killed his brother. His mother assures him that Hal is going to recover and that he should stay away from sin, especially taking away another man's life. Although Hal recovers, Doss is haunted by the experience. 15 years later, Doss is working in the church while his mother sings in the choir. The practice is interrupted by a loud noise from outside. A large car part has fallen onto the leg of a young man who is working on it, severing an artery. Doss stops the bleeding using his belt as a tourniquet and then accompanies the young man to the hospital. There, he meets with a doctor, who tells him that his quick thinking probably saved the man's life. While at the hospital, Doss meets with who is helping with a blood drive at the hospital, and he offers to donate his incompatible blood so that he can continue to talk to her. Talking to her about his dream of becoming a doctor. Later, Doss and Dorothy go to the movies on a date. As they walk through town after the show, Dorothy is almost hit by a car. Doss pulls him to safety and stuns her by kissing her. She slaps him in surprise, then walks away. She asks Doss to follow her, causing him to almost be hit by a car too. Meanwhile, Hal has decided to enlist to fight in World War II. Great War Greg and Bertha are displeased and try to talk him out of it, but Hal stands his ground and assures them that he has signed up with full intentions to defend his country. Doss and Dorothy go for a hike together. This time Dorothy lets him kiss him, and the two quickly fall in love. They spend increasing amounts of time together, and he teaches him a few things about medicine. Doss informs him that he has decided to enlist in the army, and Dorothy becomes upset. She asks him if he is ever going to propose to her, and he does so on the spot. Dorothy rejects it, claiming they will get married after his first leave. Doss finds his father in the cemetery, the graves of his best friends he lost in the First World War. Greg worries that the same fate will befall his sons. Doss reveals that he also signed up for the army. His father can't help but be disappointed in him. Doss bids farewell to Dorothy and his family. She gives him a Bible, with her photo, and they set off to begin training. At the barracks, Doss meets the other soldiers in the squad, and initially pals up with Smitty Riker, who is amusing himself by throwing a knife off to other soldiers' feet. The commanding officer, Sergeant Howell, shows up for an inspection, and in the race to line up the knife lands on Riker's foot. Howell berates each man in turn, assigning them nicknames. He notices the knife on Riker's foot and dubs him Private Idiot.
That's it, the knife.
He names one man Private Ghoul due to him looking like he is dead, and calls another Private Indian because he was looked like an Indian. Even Hollywood Zane is subdued as he stands, nicknamed Private Parts. Howell remarks on Doss's psychotic eyes, instructing the corporal to keep him away from him, no matter what. With the inspection complete, Howell orders the men out to the assembly. Zane goes to put his overalls on, but Howell stops him, stating that if he enjoys being naked so much, he can stay like that. Doss barely completes the short obstacle course with 1 second to spare, angering Howell. Just as the men are to begin their rifle training, however, Doss states that he does not wish to handle a weapon. He simply wants to save people's lives and not to take them. He also chooses not to train on a Saturday, as it is the Sabbath, a day for praising God. A livid howl marches Doss to Captain Glover, and from Doss records he finds out that he is a conscientious objector and it is not possible for an army officer to go to war without a riffle. The captain orders him to be taken to Section 8 for psychiatrist discharge. Howell decides to make Doss's life a living hell. Howell, therefore, decides to force Doss to leave of his own accord and systematically turns the other soldiers against him, making him look like a coward. Smitty tries to provoke Doss by grabbing his Bible and hot gluing a picture of Dorothy, but Doss never reverts but politely asks for his Bible back. The psychiatrist is conducted, but it is determined he is sane, thus cannot be dismissed. One night, several of the soldiers beat up Doss to a bloody pulp in his bed. Howell asks him to point out his attackers, to which he refuses, claiming he didn't see anyone. The squad is due to be released from training on furlough, but Doss is informed that he cannot be awarded a pass because he has not completed rifle training. Doss continues to stand by his beliefs and as a result, is detained and incarcerated for insubordination. He spends his wedding day locked in a cell waiting to be taken to court-martial, risking spending time in prison. Dorothy awaits Doss in church for their marriage, but he doesn't show up and the wedding is called off. She visits him and questions whether he is mistaking his own will for God's will. Doss is put on trial for high treason. Greg puts on his Great War uniform and visits his former captain, who is now a general, and talks about his son's predicament. He then arrives at the courthouse with a forged letter from Washington, D.C. by a war services commander that states Doss's right to follow his beliefs is protected by the Constitution. He is released and awarded a pass, therefore enabling him to continue with the training as a combat medic. He immediately marries Dorothy, and they consummate their marriage. Doss rejoins his squad as they head on to the Battle of Okinawa. As they approach the battlefield, they ominously pass a convoy of exhausted and badly injured soldiers coming the other way. They arrive at the base of the Nema Escarpment, a stronghold that is better known as Hacksaw Ridge.
Captain Glover.
The soldiers climb the cliff face and, once at the top, begin to quietly move forward over a field of dead and dying soldiers. The Japanese soldiers begin firing, leading to a brutal and bloody battle in which countless men are killed. Amid the chaos, Doss begins treating the wounded, administering morphine, and trying to help lower the injured soldiers down the cliff to get them to the hospital. As night falls, the squad sets up camp. Doss and Smitty share a foxhole, and the two get to know each other better. Smitty claims that he was wrong about Doss and that he is a great guy. Doss recounts the abuse he and his brother suffered at the hands of their father. One time, Greg was fighting Bertha and Doss tried to intervene, wrestling his father's gun out of his hands and pointing it at him, before shooting. He was ready to shoot again until his mother stopped him. Doss talks about how close he came to killing his father and, at the time, how willing he was to do it. Smitty fully realizes Doss is a special kind of person and he seems to even get to understand his stand and reasons for not touching a rifle. The next morning, the Japanese begin a heavy assault. Bullets and grenades are fired everywhere, and the Doss squad is forced to retreat down the cliff. Doss tries to save who he can, but, despite his input, Smitty dies in front of him. Doss remains hidden on the cliff as the Japanese soldiers walk around killing survivors. He looks for the wounded, and rigs up a pulley system to lower them down to the camp at the base of the cliff. The other men cannot believe their eyes when they start to receive injured soldiers being lowered from the cliff. At one point, Doss enters an underground defensive bunker to evade the Japanese soldiers. Inside, he tends to a wounded Japanese soldier and leaves. Eventually, Doss encounters Howell and brings him back to the base. Captain Glover apologizes to Doss for doubting him, praising him for being the bravest soldier, having saved over 75 wounded soldiers single-handedly. He informs him that the next attack falls on the Sabbath, but they will not proceed without him because they see him as a miracle, and they all agree that they need a miracle. After praying for the men, Doss joins them. Back on the ridge, the squad runs into a group of Japanese soldiers that have falsely surrendered. A battle ensues again, but the Americans begin to turn the tide. One Japanese soldier commits ritual suicide when he realizes the battle is lost. Doss helps Glover by kicking grenades towards the Japanese but is injured. After being carried to safety, Doss is informed that he is going home. He asks for his Bible and another soldier dives off to get it for him. The real Desmond Doss and Glover recount their experiences of the battle. It is revealed that Doss saved over 75 American men on the battlefield. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notifications about new movie recaps.